The Dead Sea Scrolls in Modern Scholarship by Solomon Zeitlin. Chapter 5 Other Finds. A document was discovered by Bedouin and published by Father R. DeVoe, who stated that it belonged to the Bar Kokhba period. The text of its reading of bleh, this is a great way to start. The text of its readings, according to the transcription of Father DeVoe, as follows, and he gives a couple paragraphs of Hebrew. The first part deals with a transaction about a cow which a person named Joseph bought from Jacob, the son of Judah. The second part does not make sense, and the Hebrew is deplorable. Did I say that right? Yeah. It has been assumed that it was addressed to Yeshua b. Gilgal, and that he is the very person to whom it is alleged that Bar Kokhba wrote a letter. What is strange is the spelling of the name of the father of Yeshua. It is spelled, and he gives Hebrew, in the letter but, and he gives more Hebrew, in the document. It is strange that either Bar Kokhba or the leaders of the community did not know how to spell the name of the father of the commander, and it is indeed puzzling if he is the same man in the two documents. I personally don't think it's all that strange. I mean, I was reading about what's his name? I think it's Wycliffe. You'll find like 5, 6 different ways to spell his name, and Wycliffe himself will be spelling it different. I think it's Wycliffe, but I don't think it's that strange. I think standardized spelling is more or less a modern thing, but we'll continue on here. I don't know how to read this guy's name. Rabin Owitz gives another transcription and a translation. He renders lines 3 through 6 as follows: that is, that it be known to thee that, as for the cow which Joseph ben Ariston is taking over from Jacob ben Judah, that Beth Mashko certifies it that she is his by purchase. And also, if it were not that the Gentiles were approaching us, then I would go up. So disperse. And I have advised thee concerning this, that it may not be said, it is because of disrespect that I have not gone up to thee. This translation was made after verbal surgery of the text. O.H. Lehman and S.M. Stern rendered the same lines as followed. Quote, there's a quote in the other one I didn't say, but yeah, we'll continue on here. Quote, let it be known to you that the cow which Yosef b. Aston is going to take from Jacob b. Judah, who resides at Meshke, that it belongs to him from spoils. Moreover, if the Romans were not near us, then I should have gone up and urged you in this matter, lest you should say from K, ? End quote. This translation was also made known. Yuck. This translation was also made after the text had been manipulated to be adjusted according to the grammars of Sigal, Broekleman, and Dowman, and also in accordance with the dictionary of Jastrow. The text in this deplorable Hebrew really is untranslatable. There are 6 names at the end of the document, the first being Yeshua b. Eliezer, and the second Eliezer b. Joseph. The word, he gives Hebrew, is appended after each signature. Lehman and Stern render the word writer, indicating that these 2 men were the writers of the document. As for the article in the Vestus Testamentum was written by both of them. I wonder how they divided the labor, what part was written by Lehman and what by Stern. I am sure, however, that the document about the cow was written by one person, as the handwriting is the same throughout. Short deeds like this do not need two scribes. In the Jewish Quarterly Review, October 1953, I wrote that the first two signatures at the end of the document, Yeshua B. Eliezer and Eliezer B. Joseph, were these persons mentioned in the beginning of the document. The meaning of the word, gives Hebrew, is that the document was written at their direction, and since they themselves could not write, a scribe had to be engaged to write for them, and their signatures were affixed to attest to the correctness of the statement therein. Upon examination of the signatures of these two men, one may see they were not expert in writing Hebrew, and neither was the scribe. In the Aramaic documents published by A. Cowley, the name of the scribe is given at the end of the deed, who says that it was written at the direction of so and so, i.e., quote, Nathan B. Ananiah wrote this document at the direction of Mahasiah, end quote. This was the accepted form of writing deeds. A special scribe was engaged for the purpose. The name of the scribe, however, is missing in the document signed by Yeshua B. Eliezer and Eliezer B. Joseph. The third signature on the document is that of Jacob B. Judah. He is the same person mentioned above from whom the cow was bought. The expression, yes, Hebrew, is used to indicate that he willingly sold the cow and signed for himself to confirm the sale. The last three signatures are those of the witnesses following the signatures of each of the first two witnesses. The word, Hebrew, is appended, whereas after the last signature we have the word in more Hebrew. Rabban Schwitz, I don't know how to say his name, translated it, quote, a testament, end quote, while Lehman and Stern rendered it, quote, bearing witness, end quote. In Quranic literature, however, we find the word, gives Hebrew, is used in the sense of, quote, unquote, witness, and it was used alternately with the word in gives Hebrew, e.g., he gives a sentence or so to of more Hebrew. Lehman and Stern translate the word, more Hebrew, quote, the Romans, end quote. I wondered what basis they had for this rendering. The word, more Hebrew, was the connotation of quote unquote Gentiles and not specifically quote unquote Romans. Dr. F. Cross said, quote, the documents of the Second Revolt will greatly illuminate a dark period when evidence of great significance in the history of Jerusalem and early Christianity transpired, end quote. Let us grant that the so-called Bar Kokhba letter was written by Bar Kokhba and that the document referring to the sale of a cow was written in his time, which I do not grant. They still would not illuminate any events of significance either in the history of Judaism or of early Christianity. They deal with trivial matters of no consequence. They were written by a semi-literate person, and, moreover, they are of the medieval period. Father Melech, in the Revenu Biblique, published in Aramaic, document a deed of sale, which he stated was of the third year of the Bar Kokhba revolt. He produced a facsimile and gave a description with a commentary in the Basor of December 1954. Professors S. Abramson and H. L. Ginsberg transcribed this document with an English translation and supplied notes. As was to be expected, They found ungrammatical expressions and hence resorted to amending the text. The text has, gives Hebrew, quote, "You hater," end quote. Abramson and Ginsburg amended it to read, gives Hebrew, quote, "To me," end quote. These two scholars may be right in their reasoning that linguistically and legally the word, gives Hebrew, must be amended to read, and gives more Hebrew, but it is strange that an official scribe did not know the difference between you and me. This is a clause in this deed in which it is stated that Shalom, daughter of Simeon, the wife of Hadar, said that she, quote, "may raise no objections to the sale of this house," end quote. This declaration did not legally bind her. She always could gain possession of the house and her husband Hadar for her unpaid ketubah, and her declaration under the halakot was void. Furthermore, as the wife of Hadar, she weaves her linen on the house and her husband Hadar, whereas the signature on the deed, which reads, quote, "Shalom, the daughter of Simeon," end quote, should have been Shalom, wife of Hadar. She had no, I don't know what this word is. It's Lien. I am not sure how to read that, but lion, as a daughter of Simeon upon the property of her husband. But she had one because she was the wife of Hadar. The signature of Shalom presents a great enigma. The document is dated, gives Hebrew, quote, "in the 3rd year of Israel's freedom," end quote. There is the question whether the land was free except for the fortress of Bether in the 3rd year of the Bar Kokhba revolt. The revolt broke out in the year 132 AD. The Roman authorities at first paid little attention to it. However, when Hadrian saw the danger in the spread of the revolt, he recalled one of his best generals, Julius Severus, from Britain to suppress it. Almost the entire country was in the hands of the Romans by the end of the summer of 133. Emperor Hadrian already was in Rome by the beginning of May 134. He had left Judea in April, which in all probability indicates that the entire revolt had been suppressed. Bar Kokhba fortified himself in the fortress of Bether, to which the Romans laid siege. Therefore, there is some difficulty about the date of the deed, given as the 3rd year of the freedom of Israel. Judea, again, was a part of the Roman Empire. There are coins of the 1st year of the revolt which read, quote, "of the redemption of Israel," end quote. There are also coins of the 2nd year which bear the following inscription, gives Hebrew, but there are no coins of the 3rd year. There is another question which must be raised. How did this deed find its way into the cave? The scholars who maintain the antiquity of the scrolls say that the caves either were storehouses for the Essenes, or that they lived there and had their own religious books, what could have been the purpose of the Essenes in storing away a deed written by an obscure Jew in an obscure location of an unimportant house? Insignificant documents dating from the great antiquity have been found in Egypt, but they were preserved by nature and not by religious groups. What was the purpose of the religious group in preserving or storing this ungrammatical deed? In addition to the above-mentioned discovery, fragments of almost the entire Bible were discovered, as well as books of non-biblical literature. Dr. Cross reported that a part of the book of Samuel was discovered. He it is, he says, quote, a text quite at variance with the traditional Hebrew text. In general, it follows the readings found in the Hebrew manuscripts used by the Greek translators of Samuel in the late 3rd or early 2nd century BC. End quote. He says further that commentaries on Isaiah and the Psalms were discovered. No commentaries were written before the 3rd or at the earliest the 2nd century AD. Furthermore, the book of Psalms was not canonized before 65 AD, which I would disagree with it. I think he's full of crap about that, but we'll continue on. And no commentary would have been written on a book which was not considered sacred. Again, I think he's full of crap, but again, we'll continue on. No significance can be attached to the finding of the fragments of the Bible and apocryphal literature in the caves. The Jews read the Bible and many of the apocryphal books during the Middle Ages, and these fragments belong to the medieval Geneza. Yet some scholars still maintain that the Hebrew fragments found in the cave are of an early period, notwithstanding the evidence against this. We know from medieval literature that the rabbis made use of apocryphal books. We know that Sadiah Gaon, 882 through 942, had the Book of Jubilees. Nachmanides, one I don't know why I have a problem reading the years. 1194 through 1270 quotes from the apocryphal book, The Wisdom of Solomon. He believed that the book was written by King Solomon, an opinion held by some writers as late as the 19th century. The compiler, or rather the editor of the book of the Zohar, which is the product of Middle Ages, refers occasionally to the book of Enoch, and it is evident that he made use of a version of it. There is a Midrash, Noah, which is based on an apocryphal book of Noah. We also have a Midrash which contains fragments of the Testament of Judah and the Testament of Naphtali, undoubtedly copies of the entire Testament of the 12 patriarchs. In Hebrew and Aramaic were in existence during the Middle Ages. There were also two versions at the time of the apocryphal book of Tobit, one in Hebrew and another in Aramaic, two versions of Judith and a scroll of Antiochus, a version based on the first book of Maccabees. The book of Ben Sira was known to the rabbis in two versions, Hebrew and Aramaic. Other apocryphal books in Hebrew and Aramaic were used by Jews during the Middle Ages. Therefore, it is no wonder that the Bedouin discovered apocryphal books in the cave which were in existence during the Middle Ages. Professor Muhlenberg ascribed the fragments of the book of Koheleth to an Essene scribe, quote unquote, the writings. He says, quote, is a beautiful specimen of Essene scribal art, end quote. Where does one find Essene writings that give one the right to assume that their writings were I can't read, aristic? It is evident from the account of the Essenes, as given by Josephus, that they accepted only the Pentateuch and did not consider the Ketubim holy. I'm sure you read that right. Further, the book of Koheleth was canonized in the conclave of Jabne, which was held in the last decade of the 1st century AD. At that time, the Essenes were no longer in existence. Father DeVos stated that he found a fragment from the original Hebrew from the Book of Jubilees on which the following words were written. He gives Hebrew. I feel like I'm talking like a robot right now. I'm not sure why. You're like one word at a time and I'm stopping briefly. I don't know, but you'll have to deal with it. It is very doubtful if these words are part of the Book of Jubilees. It is more likely that they were from a midrash dealing with Jacob when he went to Haran, and about that dream of his as related in the Book of Genesis. Even if we grant that this fragment is part of the Book of Jubilees, it would not prove that it belongs to the period of the Second Commonwealth, for this book was in existence in the time of Saadia Gaon and was used by the rabbis. I stated several years ago that more manuscripts and more scrolls, biblical books, commentaries, and apocryphal scrolls would be discovered by Bedouin in different caves, since the Jews and Karaites used and wrote commentaries on biblical and apocryphal books, apocryphal works. It is no wonder, then, that these writings are coming to light from various caves. In many instances, they were placed there by some of the discoverers, if, yeah, that in quotes. It was also announced that fragments of the Pesher Nahum were discovered, a work which greatly resembles the scroll of the commentary of Habakkuk. A photostat, however, has not yet been published, and therefore we cannot pass any definite judgment, since the Karaites and their sectarian compiled commentaries on different books of the Bible. The so-called Pesher Nahum has no more historic value than the scroll of the commentary on Habakkuk. The few biblical fragments which have come to light have readings different from the so-called Masoretic text, and some correspond with those of the Septuagint. It was therefore held that the biblical fragments were pre-Masoretic, and that the authors of the Septuagint might have used these readings. This theory is groundless. We have in the rabbinic literature thousands of various readings which differ from the so-called Masoretic text, and many of them are identical with those in the Septuagint. This would not prove that the biblical manuscripts used by the rabbis in the Tanakh period or even in the Middle Ages were more ancient than those of the so-called Masoretic text, and it would be absurd to say that the author of the Septuagint based their translations upon them. I myself collected more than 100 different readings of the book of Isaiah. Some of them I published in the Jewish Quarterly Review, 1950. Many of them, unquestionably, are correct readings, whereas in our Bible, that of the so-called Masoretic text, the readings are faulty, which I think he's full of crap again, but we'll continue on. Many of these readings from the rabbinic literature correspond with those in the Septuagint. A very careful watch was maintained over the Pentateuch, so that faulty readings should not creep into the text. Nevertheless, we do find different readings in the Tanakh literature which are the correct ones, while those in the Masoretic text are faulty. And these readings in the rabbinic literature correspond with those in the Septuagint. I shall illustrate with the following example. In the so-called Masoretic text, Deuteronomy 6:20, we have, in Hebrew, quote, as command you, end quote, whereas the Palestinian Talmud and in the Mechilta we have, and gives more Hebrew, quote, as command us, end quote. This corresponds with the Septuagint, which in my opinion is the correct reading. I would disagree, but again, we'll continue on. In the same book, in 2866, or chapter 28, verse 66, our so-called Masoretic text gives Hebrew, quote, night and day, end quote. The reading in the Targum of Jonathan gives Hebrew, quote, day and night, end quote. And this again is in accordance with the reading of the Septuagint, and it is the correct one. Hadisai, the well-known Karaite, reproached some sectarians who he held inserted words in the Pentateuch In Genesis 4, verse 8, our text has, used Hebrew, quote, and Cain said to Abel, his brother, end quote, while the sectarian text had, gives more Hebrew, end quote, and Cain said to Abel, his brother, let us go out to the field, end quote. This reading corresponds to that in the Septuagint. Again, we find in the same book that the reading of the Masoretic text gives Hebrew, quote, and they said to him, we found water, end quote. The Septuagint reading is, quote, we did not find water, end quote. These two versions are reflected in the Midrash as late as the 3rd or 4th century AD. The rabbis had both readings, that they could not decide whether or not the servants of Jacob found water. These citations represent only a few of the many passages of the Bible for which the rabbis had different readings, which were in accordance with the Septuagint. Hence, we may conclude that the fact that fragments of the Bible which have been found, which have different readings, does not indicate that they date from antiquity on the ground that the Septuagint was based upon them. And that is the end of that chapter.